Hey, good morning. Hello, everyone out there in Kite Land, and welcome once again to Fortuna Found Tutorials. And I want to give a shout out to all those out there who are responding in a great way to our videos, our tutorials, and people are starting to ask, for very, very specific things. Other people are responding by saying that they're actually building kites from some of these tutorials, which is very pleasing to me. But one of the latest questions that came up from a young lady is curves. How do we do concave curves or convex curves, inward curves or outward curves? So we're going to demonstrate in this segment, how I personally deal with them. Other folks may want to deal with them in a different way. I'm certainly not the party line. I'm just going to share how I do this stuff on what's worked for me. So it's always my hope that you take on some of these techniques and perhaps emulate them or improve on them or do something different that you can show me how you took an idea that I gave you and expanded on it. And that's going to apply to just about all the videos that we're going to put out. So this particular segment, as I said, it's about curves, and how we border a curve. And it can all begin as simple as cutting a 1/2-inch piece of ripstop going across. Typically when you use ripstop, cutting on the bias where it's the most stretch of the fabric would be ideal. So you can make yourself a ruler that's this thickness, or you can simply just measure and cut strips across the width of your black fabric. And all we're doing here is just folding this in half by hand. And once again, I'm doing it on my tacky table, which is my second set of hands. It helps me hold things down firmly. And all I'm doing is just simply folding this in half to make a border tape. Same as I do with my straight edges, which are typically a 1-inch tape, such as this here. Fold it in half. And there's tools out there available. I've never used them. There's some tools that have been designed strictly for the folding. I don't have one. I don't remember what they're called, but I just do it by hand. Right here on the table, no matter what the length is. It only takes me a few minutes to fold this 1-inch ripstop tape, which is getting more and more difficult to get. I found some sources for it. This is 3/4 ounce hot cut ripstop. You can call some of the mills such as Challenge, Texlon, and some other companies that put out fabric and buy, let's say, 20, 30, 40 yards of the material and have them slice it to 1-inch or 2-inch or whatever you like as far as what your needs are. And so I typically use 1-inch. I do it for separating panels since I don't use flat fell seams. Everything is put together like a puzzle. Everything butts against each other and then it's covered from the top and on the bottom with these tapes. So most of my use for something like that is applied there, but also for borders, but only for straight borders. If you're going to go around a curve such as this, it needs to be very, very, very narrow. And then fold it in half, and then you just simply wrap it around the curve. When it's thin enough, this will definitely fold around the curve, and then you run some zigzag stitch of the according size to that. It's as simple as that. So that's one approach. That would leave you with a very narrow border. So if you're not looking for something that looks like this, or such as in this kite, all of these are curves here. They were all done this way, and I'm about to show you how that's done. So this particular one here, it's got stitches on both sides. It's been hot cut on the edge. So it's welded together. It's still an exposed edge, but it's welded together. So this is not going to fray on you. because we have an actual template that looks like this. This is not exact, this doesn't match, but it's a template that looks like this, and I just simply cut the purple fabric for one side and then the opposite for the other side, and then glued the material together and then hot cut along the edge. So it was only hot cut on the inside here, but you can go ahead and also cut both sides, glue them on there, and then put the template over the top and then run your hot tacker through it again so it welds together very lightly. But I'm going to show you another technique here that takes care of all of that all at once, and it's a little bit simpler. Also, for a moment, I need to go back, something I forgot here. When we're talking about binding tapes, you can go to Joann's Fabric and purchase what we call bias tape, double fold bias tape. Very common. This is Wright's brand, and it's available at Joann's Fabrics and just about every fabric store. This is very common. This is cotton. This is a cotton tape. And I use this in my figure kites, you know, whether it's round curves, inward curves, or outward curves. This folds very, very, very quickly around the edge, and it's stretchy. It's very forgiving because it's stretchy, so it molds around any shape very easily. And then you run your stitches. When you come across an inside corner, so how do we deal with an outward corner, or let's say this area right here, when we got a piece going this way and then we got a piece going that way, you simply have a crossover and then you just cut the excess off. But when you have a situation where you have an inside angle and you're running bias tapes this way and that way, what we do is we just simply cut a slit. We open this up and we cut a small slit. So this goes into the other fabric that's in here, and the same thing going there, and then we just trim off the excess. Now, if you trim off the excess with just the scissors, which would be the first tendency anyone would have, it's going to fray on you. Fortunately, and unbelievably actually, you can take a hot tacker or your hot cutter, your regular straight hot cutter, and it actually does melt. So what I do when I got a piece of work like that, I use a razor blade and put it in between the bias tape and the fabric to protect it from the heat so I don't burn through the fabric. And then I take my ruler or just freehand cut the excess off on top of that razor blade, and it welds it very nicely. If it's still kind of stringy, I can always come with this hot tacker and then just lightly touch it up and burn the edges. So I'm always able to accomplish a pretty good corner. It's never going to look as good and as flat as when it's done with ripstop. Reason being is that you can go to that corner and then come in from the other side with a little slits. Like I said, you do the same thing here. You can just trim it off with the scissors. So that's what's happening in the corners and these B's here. They're done with the ripstop instead of the other bias tape. And I can trim off the excess very quickly. There's an example of an inside corner. I mean, an outside corner, inside corner, where you gotta, you have to cross that. So you have to cut that little slit and then, basically interlock the two together and then cut the excess off. So with this, you can just take your scissors and cut it off. So those are two systems of bordering, actually three. I showed you the straight, and this is for curves, okay? So let's get into the wider curves. So how do we do a curve that looks like that? Assuming that this is the sail of a kite, just like we see here on this glider. So I made a template because with this template you can take your fabric, your black, I use blue here because I have scraps with that, and you can spray lightly on the back the way we did yesterday with other patterns. This has already been sprayed. And with your tacker, with your burner, you can cut out the template. You can cut out one for the front and one for the back. And you just simply, when you're done, without taking it off the cardboard, once it's been cut and you have your border attached to here, you can just simply attach it, match the curve, just attach it to the curve and repeat the same process on the other side. You can come in on the inside and run a zigzag. It's already been hot cut, so it's finished. All of this got a finished edge. You can, and then of course come in on the outside. Since you have an exposed edge, you can do two things there. You can put your template up against the edge and very lightly weld the two together. That means the front and the back. And then run yet another zigzag stitch along the edge. In previous videos I have shown how easy it is to follow a defined line like that as opposed to a pencil line. So that technique will create what you see here on this kite, okay? But then there's another system that I'm going to show you where what we're doing is we're cutting just oversized pieces. Two of them. So all we're going to do, assuming this is a piece of fabric, we're going to put it over so to make sure that you have plenty of leftover here and enough in here to cover the width of that. Okay? Then we're going to come in from the other side and do the same thing. So back at the curves here once again, and I'm about to show you probably the easiest and quickest way to do this inward curve. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a little shot of the spray. For those who haven't seen the other previous video, it's Krylon Easy Tack Repositionable Glue. It's about $7, $8 a can, about half the price of others. Just want to make sure this isn't all the videos. This is my other, besides the tack table, this is my other set of hands, So I use this to fasten things together permanently, but primarily to hold them temporarily while I sew. Okay, so the iron is nice and hot. I'm going to go ahead and cut that curve. And we're going to imagine that I'm cutting a trailing edge or leading edge of a sail to a kite, even though this is just a scrap. And we're putting that curve in there. So you've already cut the whole skin. Imagine that I have the whole section of this kite here, that I have this whole section of this kite right here, and I'm just going to border all of it with this technique. Separate it from the template. Okay, so all we're going to do here, I've cut some oversized pieces that are wide enough for me to tack on to this surface and do my cutting, pre-cutting, and then sewing. So what we're going to do once again is we're going to lightly spray this. then we're gonna lay it on there to make sure that we're trying to get about 3/4 of an inch border, and we have plenty here. So from that side, and as you can see, we have plenty here to create a border that's about this thick, like this. We're going to come in from the other side and do the same thing. We're going to cover it from the other side. Give it a little shot of spray once again. I usually let glues dry a little bit. I'm putting it on pretty wet for the sake of timing here, but it's okay. So all I did there, all we're doing here is sandwiching this border on there. And hopefully the camera can pick it up. But with the light and on top of the table, once again, because I'm working on a tack table, I can see the edge right there. And if I run my nail through it, I can see it even more. But very gently I can run a pencil. So I'm barely pushing up against the edge there. So the pencil runs through. Well, see, you can erase it. Probably not going to see it once the stitches are there anyway. Anyway, you get the gist of it right there. So we got our black fabric, blue, whatever color you're using on both sides, okay? So at this point, you can, if you choose to sew a stitch on the inside, a zigzag stitch on the inside, and not on both sides, if you choose not to weld this side together with a tacker and the template, and all you're going to do is border it with some of this thin black stuff, whether it's the bias tape or with the ripstop tape. After it's been cut, you can actually cut it with the scissors. Really, you can run your scissors along here. It is not necessary to hot cut it, okay? And then you cover your edge with that, and you run a zigzag over this binding tape. And so you end up with a fully covered edge. Or we can take use the original master template and hot cut. Take the tacker. We're going through layers, so you got to go slow, otherwise it won't cut through. Let the hot iron heat up again a little bit. That's something that happens, you know, the glass will have a tendency to cool off the iron a little bit, so you have to have patience and sometimes just go slower and wait till the iron heats up again. And we're going through 3 layers, well, actually 2 layers of material here. Yeah, looks like it cut quite well. Okay, so now we've done the outside edge, and I'm going to mark the inside with the pencil. That's going to be my guideline to do my stitches on the inside. Okay, a well-marked line. But this time we can remove the master template. And look what I have. I have a nice clean hot cut welded edge here, just like that. And I can run zigzag on the edge, and then I'm going to run a zigzag on the inside of the line, or again along the middle of it, or on the outside, depending on how thick you want that border. Probably on the inside. That's what was done here. And then I'm going to come in and just cold cut on the inside. At that point, once I do the inside first, you can also, instead of keeping just the welded edge, which is this, you can also take one of these binding tapes before you sew and cover the edge like that. You know, where you take your binding tape and just run your outside stitches but over your binding, even though it's been hot cut. So you have that choice whether you cold cut this first or hot cut it first. How you finish the edge is a matter of choice. Whether you do it with bindings like this or cotton bindings like that, it's strictly up to you. So let me run to the sewing machine real quick here. So on this particular one, I'm going to go ahead and run stitches to the inside, within the inside of the line. So when I'm going to my left, the needle is hitting right there on the line, and that's my guide. Right. So once we've accomplished this, so now we're just going to do our cold cut applique cut the same way as we do in any other applique work, running the scissors along the stitches. We're going to repeat the process on the other side now. Here's another fine example of what I speak about in all these workshops, and that is working over a tacky surface. It's like having an extra set of hands, you know, where the table is actually hanging on to your work, and especially when you're doing some of this cold cutting, you know, applique cutting. And of course, if you miss, you can always go back and trim it, you know, if you end up with little points and stuff like that. So at this point, as I was saying earlier, since this is welded together, I can either choose to run yet another set of stitches here, which is what's happening in that kite that we've been showing you, or once again you can take your pre-cut binding and finish off the edge that way, even though you hot cut it. It's a cosmetic thing, so it's up to you whether you cold cut here on this side with the scissors and then cover it with this, or whether it's been hot cut. That's just, you know, a decision that you make on how you want things to look in the end. If you want a fully covered edge, then of course the bindings are great. But a welded edge works very well with the stitches there. And so you have every opportunity to choose that during your process here. So again, putting an oversized piece on one side, putting another oversized piece on the other side, marking it with a pencil so you can lay your master pattern along there, either cold cut it or hot cut it. And the same thing with a pencil, you mark your outside line. So now you have a place to run your needle through, and then you come in and cold cut on one side and then on the other side. And at that point, once again, you make the decision or whether you just want to put an outside stitch or you want to bind it. And that's it. That's how we do an inside curve for white borders like this. If you're not concerned about white borders, then just the binding only, then it's the solution. You just cover all your edges with binding tape, or what I call ripstop tape, pre-made ripstop tape, where you cut it to the thickness. To go around really tight curves, the ripstop is going to be more difficult. It's going to have a tendency to wrinkle. If you're working really around tight corners and radiuses, probably the cotton tape, the bias tape, will do you much better. I've used it all throughout my figure kites. These are not too tight a curve, but they're all done with the cotton stuff, and there's many other kites. For years I have used this, and just in recent times I've actually started going to the ripstop because I found that it's pretty easy to work with also. You know, it's on the bees, it's in many of the other kites that I've done recently. So it's a combination of both things. I still use this bias tape quite a bit also, primarily on tight spaces, tight radiuses. When I'm in a hurry, I don't have time to fold large amounts of ripstop. Here it is already folded. That's the advantage. I can just pull it right out of the roll and go to work. It's nice and stiff. It goes into the fabric really well, and it sews quite well as well. It flattens out really nice, and if you need to hot cut it and weld it, it does that too. It does melt, not quite like ripstop, but good enough to get a good clean finish. So great stuff to work with. Now, I think that covers the inside curve. So now we can run through outside curves. If we're going in the opposite direction, such as circles, unless you're running lots and lots of cross sticks across that curve, there's no way to hang on to that curve unless we're running a whisker through it, unless we're running some kind of fiberglass, some kind of batten, something. It has to be, you have to have structure, which means you have to put a sleeve. It's not just the border, but you have to make a sleeve from the back as well. So we're going to show you how, a couple different methods on how to do that. So in this kite, for instance, it has a curved edge. This happens to have cutouts here for the framing, which is on the exterior of the kite. Let me spin this around so it can be nicely visible to the camera. So all that happened here, let's say we didn't have this. Something like this applies here too, except with this shape. So it's a cardboard template to do the edging. So that went on from this side, fully cut, not oversized like we did over there. You go ahead and, I've gone ahead and cut this full pattern, okay? And from one side only. On the back side, no, actually on this particular kite we did the reverse. This front layer is a sleeve as well. Okay. So typically on a curve like this, we would take this and glue it to the surface. Spray it to the surface. But in this case, because we have a stick running through it, we have to make a sleeve out of this. So what we did here is we went ahead and cut this template out, the fabric, and ran it parallel to the edge of the kite. The edge of this kite goes all the way to here, okay? And first, of course, we marked it with a pencil so we know where to place that template, which is something like this, but with this configuration. And then you could spray it on there, but very, very lightly. You could use the spray, and from a distance you can spray it and attach it to that. And before we put the border on, you pull it, and you pull the lip over. In other words, you stitch it first, of course. You run your sewing machine through the edge. So now the two these two are put together, and then you can come in with the mineral spirits with a rag and clean that spray that you put on there. Okay, it's probably not going to get on one. It's only going to be on one side, whichever side you choose. So if we choose this black, you just flip this over and kind of clean it, or you can use sticky back tape, double-sided tape, and you pull it open and you just roll with your thumb. You just roll the little pieces that you put in here to hold this part in place, okay? So once again, if it's got an outward curve like this, almost generally you need to put some framing in it, and the only way that you can address that is by making a pocket or a sleeve or a tunnel out of this section of the kite. So once we're done removing tape or removing glue from the inside, and again, whatever you're building could require something different, but the generality of it all is sitting right here in front of us. This is the approach, but I'm also going to show you how to do a tunnel pocket on top of a regular border from the back side. And then we just simply run the bias tape. We, with a cotton tape on the edge or the ripstop tape, and we cover the edge. And that's the end of it. So, but at the end of the sleeve, how do we finish the end of the sleeve? So if this was the sleeve, this black, and we're sitting here, then we don't fold to the inside, we fold to the outside, and then we run a little piece of tape, of this double sticky back tape, or seam tape, whatever you call it, a little piece there, and put the two things together, put the two sides together, and that's it. Then just stitch it. So the reason for not folding it to the inside is so when you run a stick through it, it's not getting caught on this edge all the time. So as long as it's on the outside, it's perfectly smooth in there. If you do it with a spray, you have to remove that glue, otherwise it's going to get full of sand in there, and the sand is going to stick to the ripstop. So you don't want that in there. You want to make sure that it's slick and clean so your stick can run smoothly through there. And of course, if you use the seam tape to tack it on there while you sew, you just simply open up the seam and then take the tape off, and there's no cleaning. So I've used that technique quite often. I just run a little, 2-3 inch pieces in there, and then with my thumb I just remove it. You don't end up wasting anything. The tape is going to get used anyway, so it's not a waste. So let's say that we had this border, this was the border, and using a slightly different technique, let's say a different kite, such as that circular kite, the swan kite, how do we build a sleeve here? The same way. In sections, with a fold back, done exactly the same way as what I explained in the front. You have to cut that template out, just like what's in the front, and put it in through the back here, tape it or spray it on, fold the edges back, on both sides, whether it's the full length or whether it's in sections, whether it's got openings, the technique applies. So for that, maybe we can show what we did on the round kites or the bead kites. So here's a classic example of pockets and sections. And of course, sometimes we do that deliberately in short sections like that because either there's ferrules for ease of passage. Here it needs to be open in order for these to go through, these other whiskers that go into the wings. It needs to be open here in order for this whisker to fit up here. So there's always different reasons. In a perfectly round kite like the swan kite, there's openings there too for the spreader to go through. So it also enables you to have several entryways and several gates in which to run your sticks through. But if we didn't have this framing around here, how would these curves hold up? They wouldn't. So you have to. So outside curves are completely different than inside. So these require structure almost all the time. Same thing, these are curved here on the wings. We can't put carbon in there because in a short section like that, carbon is too stiff. So we have to go with very, very, very small fiberglass that's very flexible, that will induce that curve. So it's a rhythmic thing that with a little experience, with a little time, with a little experimentation, you learn how to implement all these things. But here you can see, you know, pockets done in sections. You can see my fold backs. They're always on the outside, never on the inside. And all that's holding that is the tape, you know, the sticky back tape, just a little piece of it. And then of course it's bound on the outside. This particular bee was done with the bias tape from the fabric store. Several others on the stack here are done with the ripstop tape. And as I explained earlier, you got to deal with the corners here with that bias tape. So again, you know, the dacron's going across. In another video we'll talk about the purpose of that and how all that fits into my program and why, you know, the protection of the fabric because of the abrasiveness of carbon fiber. So that's basically the nutshell, you know, on outside curves. They require a sleeve of some sort in order for you to run thin fiberglass, carbon, whatever. In this case, we do have carbon on the outside, but for the wings, it required fiberglass. So I think that covers it with the curves, you know. Straight ripstop, once again, bias tape, and then of course the white borders. Same thing here, the same thing applied for the white border here. Yeah, this is all a template. A template and a template. So the same process happened here as it happened on the red kite, and it's happening there. It's just different width, different style, but same techniques. Hope you enjoyed. I've certainly enjoyed sharing all these techniques with you, and I hope to see that you use some of these techniques in your construction. And in the meantime, I bid you a great day, great kite building, and don't forget, put in some responses there, and if there's any questions that you have, make sure you ask them. And once you get proficient with these techniques, make sure you share them with others so we can keep the sport alive. Until the next one.